Hello and welcome to Adobe Live. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are designing and creating today and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Flynn. I'm hosting today and hanging out with my friend, illustrator and artist Jeremy Lord. Hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Back in the studio.
Yeah, back in the studio from yesterday.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So we had some Christmas like spin to win action. If you missed, I'll let Jeremy kind of do the recap. But yeah, we had a stream yesterday. We're kind of continuing on from that stream. A little bit Christmas themed, a little bit experimenting with a new kind of show that we might be doing next year. If you've got any questions as we're going along or you want to say hi, Behance chat, we're keeping an eye on that. And also YouTube, we'd love to hear from you. We're hanging out for an hour. Let's do this. Jeremy, do you want to recap kind of what we did yesterday?
I do, yeah. So yesterday we had this idea of like, how do you get over the like white fear of the white page? How do you get an idea? And so you came up with this idea of like double spinning wheel of fortune kind of thing. So we had some styles like anime, pixel art, retro wave, sketchy, all that kind of stuff. And then we had some Christmassy themes because it's that time of the year, with like Santas and candy canes and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we did a couple of random spins until we kind of found something that we liked, and then we started getting into some sketching. So what's on screen now is
what's on screen in a second. Here we go.
Here we go. Okay. So we started doing some like concept sketches, thinking about, like how do you draw the pose, what pose are you going to do, getting inspiration, getting some reference, all that kind of jazz. Because we were doing the spinning wheel of fortune, I came in not having any idea what we were going to do, so I didn't have any reference material or kind of anything like that. I do have that now, so I went home and brought some kind of, did some research, looked at what kind of Kirby actually looks like and kind of getting some reference and some inspiration. So we started from here, then you suggested like Kirby, Santa, blah, blah, blah. And then we started with this. So we got a sketch going, then did some basic inking, and that's kind of where we ended up yesterday.
Right, yeah, that was the end of the stream. That was pretty far to get in an hour with all of our talking and wheel spinning and such.
And that's where, like, a lot of the work kind of goes in because you're laying the foundations of what it's going to be. And then in between yesterday and today, I took this on board, kind of did some changes, just had a bit of a think about. One of the main things that we spoke about yesterday was giving yourself a brief, right? Giving yourself a real, actual brief that either it's for a company that you might want to work with, trying to put that into context as well. That's always really important. And then working from that. So based on that, I then kind of evolved it into this. So now my Kirby looks a lot more like a Kirby, right? Because it's like, I thought I knew what Kirby looked like. He's like, no, you didn't. Go online, go see what he actually looks like. As you can see, like I gave him like fingers and gloves and stuff. It's like, nope, that's not at all what he's like. And so we ended up with this, right? So we had anime Santa as the theme. And then it was like Kirby. And so I made this kind of layout of a page of like he had a little kind of pet dog, was suggested that we kind of have like Bob the Pug in there.
Shout out, Bob.
And then some Christmas elves as well. So I made the elves kind of like same style as Kirby. And so we've got this kind of like layout of a page that I guess that could be the cover of an anime or like a manga book. But doesn't really fit, like Nintendo would never really do this, right?
Right, you'd like create a comic like kind of thing. It's not typical.
It's not really what you would expect. So then that became Game Boy box art.
Nice. That's awesome.
So similar kind of idea from what we had at the start, where it's like, Kirby being bad Santa and like hoovering up all the Christmas presents and bits to what we've got here, which is the same kind of thing, but now it's got context. Right?
Cool.
Now it's a thing for a thing that could exist, and that could potentially work to something. And so we've got like, Kirby's Xmas Attack Ultra.
It's like, I love the Ultra, man.
It's got to do that.
That's so good. That's my favorite
that's
bit.
kind of going there in that context. And I've got a little, like, we'll probably do like a Japanese version of this just because we're nerds as well.
I love the elf too, the elf ears and the shoes. Like Kirby's such an interesting character in that way.
Yeah.
Like you don't have a lot of, it's almost like designing a stamp. Like you don't have a lot of real estate, so everything's got to be, you know what I mean? Like you don't have much to deal with, so everything has, you know, yeah.
And so that elf kind of went through a few iterations as well. Like I gave him wings, these are the ears.
Sure.
But it's like, how do you do the design and the pose that you want when your character like doesn't really have arms and legs? It's just like stumps and a big ball.
Yeah. So cool.
And actually, when you look at some of the things that they're able to do with it, it's super clever. Like how they're able to get the pose and like a folded arm, even quite simply from that. It's actually quite genius. So, the little kind of curve on the elf slippers, I think, is just like enough to say elf.
Yeah.
And then the pug changed from like a full-on like actual real-life dog to being something a little bit more like Kirby-esque.
Right, it's part of
like
the Kirby
weird
world now,
Yeah, so it's not quite a pug anymore, but I feel like it fits a little bit better with what we got.
Yeah.
And then we've got a little bit of a landscape behind and kind of like, you know, platformer kind of levels in there to get that context. So having that context has given me a lot of kind of like a clearer brief as to what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we'll put a background in. How am I going to do the background? Now that it's a Game Boy video game Kirby, it needs to look a certain way. It needs to have a certain thing. And that gives me kind of like ideas and other things that I can work with a little bit more clearly.
Nice. Love it.
So here we are. We've gotten all these kinds of things in. I've left Kirby himself kind of not inked up. I've got all my kind of layers laid out in my little folder here, OTLs. This is kind of the shorthand that I use for outline. So I'll do the outlines and then I'll do the colors underneath. We'll get to the colors in a sec. But yeah, I just thought I'd show you guys real quick how, like, what's the process here for the inking of something like Kirby. And we'll make a new layer and we'll name it as well. Always important. It's not something I always say to do that, and I always want to do that, but I don't always do that. So here we go. We just kind of start inking that up. Maybe boost the smoothing up a little bit more to like 27, and get that kind of inking in. Oh, I'm on the wrong brush setting. I need to turn off transfer. There we go.
What was transfer doing just then?
Transfer does this thing where like, if I press lightly here, I'm getting a lighter, like a thinner line, but it's the same level of darkness.
Okay.
Right? It's just black. Transfer does that thing where it's basically, it become a bit sketchier, and if I press lightly, it'll be thin and lighter.
Right.
So it just looks a little bit more kind of sketchy. That's the setting that I use when I'm doing the sketches.
Yep.
And then when I'm doing the inking, I just want a solid black line.
So
no variation in opacity, so I turn it off.
Cool.
And then I can get my work in that way. Whoops.
Awesome. Love that. Love to see it. Bruce in chat says, this looks amazing, Jeremy.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. I agree. And then I think we have a question as well. Where did you get the Game Boy brand section, or did you make it yourself? I just grabbed that from the internet, I assume.
I just grabbed it from the internet, yeah.
Yep.
And you can probably see that it's not the highest res, but again, like, doesn't really matter for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mostly because, like, this isn't going to be printed by Nintendo, unfortunately. So it doesn't really need to be that big.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, just like either you could make it yourself or you could grab it off the internet and try and get a kind of a nice resolution on it if you can, but not the end of the world if you cannot.
Yeah. And if you're doing something for a portfolio, would you put like something like Nintendo and Game Boy, like the actual logo and brand on, or would you call it like Fame Boy or something like that and kind of do some sort of...
It's a good question, because it's like the point of this is it's for that client, right? So it needs to look like it's real, like it's not actually for the client, but it needs to look like it would be.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, like, yeah, it can't be like, like like Fame Boy or whatever else, and
Yeah.
like Nintendo or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it needs
Like
to
Mike,
look like the real
instead
thing.
of Nike, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, like even just like putting that on your Instagram or anything like that, people will be like, "Oh, what is this? I don't understand. What is Fame Boy?" Like, it needs to be the context that is real for people to be able to kind of latch onto it and understand it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, because it's just we're kind of going on that thread of giving yourself briefs and like filling out your portfolio, or the whole thing of creating the work that you want to be seen to do, so that you do get those clients, right? Like if you're going to I don't know, I don't think this would ever happen if you're pitching for Nintendo or something, right? Or a game company, and you're like, I really want to do game artwork for, you know, Steam or their website or whatever. That's my niche. That's what I want to go for. You need to fill your portfolio out with that stuff before you get the first job, right? Because you have to kind of prove that you can actually do it in the first place. So yeah, it's just interesting, like, you know, how far down trying to make it look real do you go? And I guess you just go full for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, right? That's this idea of like context in this setting is not only should you try and find the actual kind of logos and colors and everything else that would be used in this, but what's more, I think, and probably maybe a little bit more important, is try and kind of have a look at what that brand would or wouldn't do, right?
Yeah.
What's the attitude of that brand? How do they work? Like, try and do something that would actually be reality for them. Like Nintendo doing like a first-person shooter, for instance, probably never going to happen. They're never going to do a Call of Duty thing. If they did a first-person shooter, it'd be weird and wacky and kind of over the top and full of
right.
So if you were like, I'm going to do like, you know, game box art and it's going to be for Nintendo, then you need to think about, okay, what is that brand doing, or what is Nike doing that Adidas isn't doing, or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You need to really kind of analyze the differences in those brands in order to do something that would be not only look real, but actually they could look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like maybe we should hit this person up and work with them.
Yeah.
Like they get what our brand is and they get how we work. And that I think is really, really, really crucial when you're doing this, because it kind of shows your understanding of the brand, but it also not only makes it look real, but it potentially could be used, and that would be great, right? Like you're obviously doing this for yourself and everything, but if you could get reached out like from that company and be like, hey, we're going to use this, fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
All right, so we've got our Kirby kind of done. I'm leaving some of the other details in there for a little bit later. They're not necessarily going to be outlined in black. But what we can start to think about as well here is we've got some of the things that are in front. Obviously, I haven't kind of masked everything out, but rather than erasing stuff, I'm going to start doing layer masks to where, for instance, the foot, his kind of foot here is being masked by that elf. I don't want to erase it because I might move it later on, but I am conscious of like, all right, let's get these details to not be kind of clipping each other.
Right.
But then I can also move them later on if I need to.
Right. Gotcha. That's cool. It's like a bit more non-destructive kind of way of of working. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's think about some color now. We'll get to the type a little bit later on. But let's start thinking about some colors. So I have gone in, as you can see down here, I've gone in and I dropped some colors from Kirby references.
I love that your like color palette is almost like Kirby shaped.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Little blobs.
And so what I do now is I've got this sketch layer here that can kind of stay. I should probably name that. And now I would do another group in between those and I call that my shorthand for colors, and put a new layer in there. How many layers I would work with kind of varies a little bit on what I'm feeling and kind of what I'm likely to want to make changes on.
Yeah.
Having everything smashed down on the one layer, it's going to make it difficult for you to move stuff around or resize. having every single little element in here, like the beanie and the beard and the tongue and the body and the arms and the feet on every single, like everything is on a different layer.
Yeah.
There is such a thing as too many layers, for sure.
Yeah.
But let's just go in and start coloring this. I'm going to start with Kirby, obviously, and then we can kind of see what happens after that. Because I've got colors here that are guided, that are given to me by the brief that I've given myself, I don't have to overthink too many things, right? So Kirby, straightforward. I don't have to think about it. It needs to be the colors that it needs to be. When I'm creating something from scratch that's like, hey, I'm going to do a universe, I will use this color palette system that I've made for myself.
Nice.
So these are all kind of like, I would like to work with neons. I like to work with kind of these like bright poppy colors. So I have these kind of like 6-fold little, like almost like Trivial Pursuit pieces.
Oh yeah.
That have
Little pieces.
Sets of like color schemes in them that I like to work with. So I would potentially choose something like this. And what I would do with that is I would do what's called the 60-30-10 kind of thing. Whereby, like for instance, these colors here, we've got 6 colors, but you can see that generally speaking, there's like 3 or 2 colors that are kind of along the same color scheme. Then we've got 2 other colors that are not, and then we've got a pop color.
Okay.
Right? So in this one, for instance, we've got a purple, a dark blue, and a light blue. That's 60%. Then we've got a red and an orange. That's probably going to be our 30. And then the yellow is going to be our 10.
And by 30%, you mean of the amount of the overall composition?
Yeah, that's
right. Like, okay, cool.
And so what you want basically is you want an overall color scheme. So let's say that it's like, you know, wintry, cold. So those blues are going to be my 60%, right? So 60% of the color scheme is going to give us the tone or the temperature of that. Then 30% is going to be something that's going to kind of work with that, but just add some variation, so it's not monochromatic.
Right.
And then the 10% is like the chili or the mustard. That's like a completely different color. Usually something that's going to be complementary, right? So it's not going to be, if it's blue or if it's a cool color, you want a warm, bright color to complement that. And that's going to be the thing that's going to make it kind of like pop.
Right. Pop color. I like
that. And so you don't want that to be too prevalent, but that 60-30-10 rule is potentially going to help you a little bit with that artwork. And it's not a hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
Like you might have like 60-30-5-5 or something, like depending on how that kind of evolves. But we will kind of be working with our, with that kind of basis, but again, I don't need to worry about it too much at this stage, mostly because those colors are dictated to me by the theme that I've chosen for this.
Right. Cool. I like that. If anyone's got any questions about the color theory stuff as well, throw them in. Yeah, it is always interesting, isn't it, when you're working with a brand, like, because if we didn't go down the Kirby route, there's, you know, you refer straight to your color palette, like the world's your oyster, right?
Yeah.
But because it'd be pretty weird if it was like full on neon without kind of doing the baseline. You could always change it and add some flourishes and stuff, but
yeah,
you know, Kirby's Kirby.
And if I wanted to work with that neon color palette, then I could probably change the theme. Which just so happens we're doing a Christmas thing because it's that time of the year. But you know, I if it was me for fun, I might do like a Kirby's Cyberpunk Adventure or something. Like whatever. Like it could be something along those lines. It doesn't have to necessarily be that, depending on what you want to do. Now, again, like if you are going to do that, that might not be necessarily what Nintendo would do with the Kirby IP. So something to kind of consider as well there is like, is that actually realistic, or am I potentially kind of setting myself up for failure because Nintendo would never pick this up?
Yeah. It's funny, I'm getting, do you hear about the Sonic kind of mini game that they brought out? I think it was an April Fool's thing or something this year.
Oh yeah?
Let me just make sure this is really a thing and not just something I heard on a podcast. everyone just talk amongst yourselves while
So just a quick little tip here while Flynn's doing that. Obviously Santa's beard is probably going to be white, but because we've got the white of the paper, like you generally, when you're doing these kind of colors, you generally don't want anything to be that white. Simply because it's going to make it a little bit tricky to get that color. So what I do is I tend to just like tint that color with just a little bit of color.
Right.
So that it's not white, it's something else, but I can work with it a little bit later on. Now what I will do as well is I can make a selection, and this like hue saturation shortcut that I'm about to bring up, which is Control or Command U, which brings this up. I spend a lot of time with this window on my screen. And what it does is it allows you to like mess with a color a little bit and like, you know, tweak it, but see it as you're doing it. So you can kind of mess around with the colors a little bit
like
more.
real time.
Yeah. And so, you know, like I'll mess around with that and try to see like just how much tint do I really need to put in there. Like that's probably a bit too much. We want it to be a bit brighter, maybe drop the saturation down, just so that it'll look white when I've got all the rest of the colors, but it's still a color that will say something when I'm kind of working on it a little bit later on, right?
Yeah.
Then we've got his little cheek blushes, gotta get those in.
Cute. The thing I was looking at was, the Sega came out with a game this year, 31st of March, The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Whoa.
Yeah. And the whole thing is like a mystery clue to find out who done it.
It's a bit great.
I know, right? But it's just interesting because it's like such a thing that IP would never do. And I was really shocked that it was actually Sega that came out with it. It's crazy.
Wow.
Anyway, there you go. It exists. I wasn't crazy. Yeah. There you go. So you never know what people are going to do with their IP.
Clearly.
This is cool. We haven't had any questions about the device, but we always get questions about like what do you use, what tools do you use, like entry-level stuff, like what do you recommend, what you're using today, what you use at home. So can we talk a little bit about like the hardware side of things?
Yeah.
I think it's always like an interesting thing to kind of talk
Sure.
about.
So I'm using a Microsoft Surface, big kind of like all-in-one computer that's also like draw on the screen, and I've got a stylus to do that. What that does is it means a couple of things where, and we don't have a mouse available here, but what it means basically is if you were using a mouse has two settings, on, off.
Right. It's binary.
Like, this is it's like a dimmer almost that has levels of pressure.
I like that. Comparing like a light on and off switch to a
little
dimmer.
bit. Right?
Love it.
So if you were to do a stroke with a mouse, what you're going to get is you're going to get like a uniform color, uniform size, uniform shape throughout the entire brush stroke.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but you know, when you're sketching, you probably want a little bit more control than that. So what these guys do is it allows you to use an actual pen as if it was a pen rather than a mouse, which like I always kind of compare, you know, drawing with a mouse as like it's like brain surgery with a brick. It's not
right.
It's not going to be helpful to anybody.
Yeah.
And you're making your life really hard. But what it also does, the pressure, the pen pressure that you can apply means that you are going to get these variations in thickness. Like if I press lightly, it goes thick, or as we saw before, it goes lighter depending on the settings of the brush. So it just means it's a bit more of a comfortable experience. So this is what we're working on here, but there's hundreds of different options that you could work with this kind of tablet. But if you are thinking of doing digital illustration, I would hugely recommend getting something like this. Pixel art is probably the only exception to that rule where it doesn't really matter because it's kind of almost not really drawing in the same way at least. So that would probably be okay, but everything else you're probably going to want something like this, whether it's a full-on thing like this or a Wacom or any other brand or even an iPad or anything like that. You're going to want something that's going to allow you to use a pen on a screen in a digital world.
Yeah. Cool.
Basically. Yeah.
Nice.
Let's do some little effects here on his eyes. I'm going to go onto here, and I'm going to just I'm going to do that little like quintessential curvy blue glow that lives inside of his eye. So I'm just making a rough selection here. If I was doing this at home, by the way, it's like, oh, you're doing this so fast. If I was doing this at home, I would work probably a bit more cleanly, and that would take me more time. So something like this at home is definitely going to be a little bit more like time involved. But yeah, basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make these selections and apply my gradients.
Oh, cool.
There we go. And we've got, I forgot about the new feature for the gradients in here.
Which one's that?
So the gradients, the gradients now work in a slightly different way to what they used to in Photoshop. And so it just means more control, but it's just a different way of working on it.
Oh, must have missed that. Don't work with gradients, I guess, enough.
Oops. What am I doing? How's this going to work?
It's coming in black and white instead of...
Yeah, it's because I've got the wrong setting up here. There we go.
Huh.
So it just means like now you can control it after the fact.
Thing. Yeah.
It's almost like it's a bit more like in Illustrator how it works.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I can just, if I'm happy with that,
and you can change it after as well.
You can come back and edit it. It's a bit more of a live gradient.
Because before you used to drag it and then drop it, and it was done.
Yeah.
And then the pixels were like ironed into that layer, and you could.
That's it.
Like Command Z, or you can move on.
Start again.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we've got a little bit more kind of control over what we're doing. It's just my brain had to revert to like modern times. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call this iGrads for gradients.
Before we move on, just a quick question. Is there a big difference in price from Wacom Cintiq? Compared to what, I guess?
Yeah.
I think, because this is quite old, but I think at the time it was pretty expensive.
But this is also a computer,
It's also a computer, right? Whereas the Cintiq is like a peripheral.
It's like it's a thing you plug into a computer that requires a computer to work.
Yeah.
Not all of them do. Like Wacom do make all-in-ones that are a computer.
Is that the Intuos?
That's the Studio.
That's the Studio. Yeah.
So the Cintiq range is the screen, like you draw on the screen. Intuos is like you have a little tablet here and you draw here and you look on a screen, which sometimes can feel a little bit off-putting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool.
Let's do our elf, and then we'll get into some shading
Nice.
in a sec as well.
Looks like there's some discounts going at the moment for Wacoms, actually, if anyone's interested in that. That's pretty... Because I was talking about getting one for the studio here, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Might be a good time to get one, I think. Pretty cool. It's hard for me to buy tech for something like that because I don't draw.
But you see a lot of people use it for different things. Like you can use it for 3D, you can use it for like a range of different things.
True.
So it's not necessarily like, oh, I don't really do that much illustration, I don't really need one. You get it for a lot of different things, and I know a lot of people who use it for a range of different things. That's not necessarily what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So it's still definitely worth. And there are a range of different price options, I think, as well. I'm not sure exactly on like all the different brands that exist.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch.
Yeah. That's cool. It probably varies from
Christmas
region and stuff as well.
Yeah, it would do. And size and like needs for you, like what do you actually require for what you're trying to do, all that kind of stuff. It can be a very difficult question to answer as well. Like I get a lot of students ask me like, which one should I get? I think it's kind of like asking somebody like, which car should I buy? It's like, what do you do? Like, do you have a family? Like, how often do you use it? Where do you live? How's parking in your area? Like,
Totally.
All that kind of stuff, I think, is really difficult to answer.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that, like, as I said, I would recommend getting one if you're going to be into like drawing a little bit.
Yeah. That's cool.
Let's give this guy some. We made him orange and his beanie is green. And he should also have, I'm used to working on a Mac and I keep pressing the Windows button. Give him some stripes on his beanie because it's Christmas.
So you jump between Mac and PC quite a bit, same as me?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, because you've got this thing, and then you're just saying you used to work on a Mac, so. Yep. I jump around too. It's really just the shortcuts that you notice.
Yeah, the keyboard just layout a little bit different, but otherwise Photoshop works exactly the same way on both. Which is good, because that's what you want.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna put a background in here and then we'll start getting into some shading. So background will allow me to get a sense of kind of lighting happening, and that's gonna help me do this. So this is where I would either go in and pick one of these kind of color schemes to work from and go like, all right, this is what I'm gonna stick to, or I can freestyle it and just go bam. It's probably gonna be too dark, but now with my Control U and kind of hue sat slider, I can lighten this and kind of fix it up as I need, and I can come back and change this later on if I want to, but I want to get something that's like quite bright again. So we're doing Kirby, so it needs to be bright. It doesn't, we don't want pastel-y tones.
Yeah.
And something that feels kind of like a cold, like winter sky. Then I can start back in with another gradient in here. I drop my color, make sure I'm on the right layer, and grab a circular gradient, and then stick a gradient in the background there. And why are you not working? What's happening? Because I'm on my wrong thing. There we go. All right, so that's going to be fine for now. Maybe I'll come back and change this later.
Yeah,
right? Maybe like depending on what the font of the color is, what other elements in this thing are going to be, I might decide to tweak this later. The point is I can, so we can do that, and we can might do that right now. Actually, give it a.
Prefer just not to have a white background. Is that kind of part of it? You're trying to add more color into it?
Yeah, so what I've done is I've given it a sense of like there's a light source somewhere.
Right. Oh, light source, yeah, of course.
So now if I go into here and like pick a different color, I don't know if it's going to do it light, no. I can think about, how do I change the color? I'm just going to flatten this actually. I've forgotten how to edit this color. So now that it's no longer live, I won't be able to go back and change the gradient, but I can tweak the color a little bit more.
Right.
So what that's going to do is it's going to give me, I kind of like that actually, I kind of like the pink. A little bit of like a cooler color. What it's going to do is it's going to give me a light source to work from.
Right.
And now I can start messing around with the shading. So I'm going to grab these two guys. They're the background, so I don't want them to be in my color layer here. I'm going to put them in a different group. Call it EKG. There we go. And I'm going to go on my group where all of my colors are. All right. And what I can do is there's a million different ways of doing shading and lighting when you're doing this. The way that I like to work is a kind of like a non-destructive way, where I will go in on the group where all of my layers are and do what's called an adjustment layer.
Yeah.
And the adjustment layer is going to look exactly like what you saw with my hue saturation. So I'm going to go down here to this little kind of like a cut in half circle and go to hue saturation, which bring up this very similar menu to what you saw me doing before with my hue sat slider. Right? It's exactly the same menu, but I'm going to go in and drop that lightness, and I'm probably going to mess around with the color as well, and I'm going to give it a bit of a cooler tone because it's winter, so I want to kind of change the quality of the shading to have a tone. Again, like I did with the beard, it wasn't just white. You almost never want to go shading, add some black.
Right, yeah.
It needs to be like it's a warm shadow, it's a cool shadow, or it's kind of complementary to the drawing that you've got in here. And it's just going to make your drawing a lot more kind of vibrant and, I guess, understandable in that sense.
Right.
And so now I need to go back on, drag it out of that, double click on this, and then make sure I've got this ticked. So what you'll notice when I do that is it will apply to Sorry. So I've got it applying to everything in here. Why are you not letting me do that?
I'll let you click it.
It won't let me click it. Yeah, that's weird. Am I in a different... that's why. Because I have put that layer has gone into the group where the outlines are. And so it doesn't understand what's going on. That's why it's doing that, I think. There we go.
So there's something in there that didn't
So I
allow
put it
you
in a
to-
different group.
Right, okay.
So what that means is in this group, it was at the bottom of that layer, and what this button does is it applies to the layers that are underneath it, but because there was no layers underneath it, it was like, I don't know what you want me to do.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, a little bit of troubleshooting. But as you can see, once I do that, the background, which is now being changed,
Yeah.
goes to not being changed. So what that little button does is it means I'm only going to apply this adjustment layer to the layer or layer group that's immediately underneath me, right? And that's why I put all my colors in a different layer, and I put the background colors in a separate group as well, so that they're not getting impacted by this thing.
Yeah.
And it only is going to work on this guy. And so what that does is it also creates a layer mask on this. So now I can come in with my layer mask colors and start adding light or shadows,
Oh, yeah.
right? So I generally like to not add in the light or the shadow. The light, I'd like to work with the shadow, depending on what you're doing. If there's more shadow, if it's a darker thing, then you probably want to paint whatever's going to be the least of, if that makes sense. So if there's less light, then you paint the light. If there's less shadow, then you paint the shadow.
More of an efficiency thing than anything else?
Yeah, basically. So I'm just actually going to fill this with black, and I'm going to work with the white to paint the shading back in rather than the light that I had before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so now what you're seeing is, regardless of the colors that I've made, not only is it blocking it to the colors that I created and not affecting the background, whereas if I tick this off, you'll see that when I paint over here, it's doing that.
Yeah.
It's doing funny stuff, right? And if I put that back on, it won't appear on the background.
Yeah.
But it also means that regardless of the colors that I had, I'm gonna get the shading that I wanted applied to those colors in a uniform way. So it's kind of like I'm doing the shading of all the colors at the same time.
Without having to change the color and the brush.
Without having to change the color or the brush or anything else. Now, the really cool thing about this is, as you said, like this idea of like non-destructive versus destructive is something that digital artists work with quite a bit is, can you change it later on, right? Can I save this, come back to it like tomorrow or in a week's time and edit it? And the answer is yeah, because what I've got now is if I decide all of a sudden Kirby is, it's a different thing and it's special like desert Kirby, I can change the colors on Kirby and the shading changes accordingly, the colors change accordingly.
Yeah, that's crazy, hey.
So it just means that it's shading that's ready to go for my artwork to kind of happen underneath it. And so it is quite non-destructive. And I can also come back and edit it, right? If it's too dark or if it's not dark enough, I can come back and swap this out. I can make it different kind of tones if I want to. There's a lot that I can do here with this without having to like lock anything in.
That's really cool. And just the efficiency, right? And you know that you're not going to have to come back and do it all again. Like you try to, basically you get the shading more or less correct and you're like, cool, I'm pretty much done with shading. Now, and then it's just, if you want to make it more intense or change the overall color, you're not going to have to go back and redo all of the shading.
That's it. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it can do some funny things sometimes. Like you see, like now the shadow on the tongue is like purple, but I don't mind that too much, to be honest. So that's kind of what's happening with this, and I have got something funny happening here. Why are you making the eyes darker. Maybe it's because I didn't actually paint the eyes in. There you go. That's it. Good, that's better. And I can do some little bits of highlights as well if I wanted to. So let's grab this guy and get some things in here. And then we can do a little bit of like make him a bit shiny if we want to. Normally what I would do when I'm doing kind of like more cyberpunky things is I would have like, there would be like a neon sign on the right or left of it, right? Like for instance, let's say that there's like a bright, probably wouldn't do pink in this sense because he's already quite pink. I'd go with a blue to complement that. And maybe there's like a neon sign like down here, right? It's like emitting a lot of light. What I would like to do in a lot of cases is what's called like a rim light or a bounce light.
Yeah.
And that would come in and just latch on to this. And this is also probably going to be my like 10% color. That's what I was talking about. It's this like pickup, like mustard color.
Yeah.
That just gives it a little bit more volume and gives it a sense of kind of like belonging in the world and lighting. So if I've got something like that happening down there, there's some really cool things that I can do with that that are going to be really interesting to work with, right?
Nice.
So I could do potentially like this gradient down here could be that color. Obviously that's not on the right side, but if I'd smacked another gradient down there, it would potentially get that idea going a little bit more, right? So there's another kind of like light, undescript like light happening from the back here that's just going to allow me to get that similar kind of tone happening in here and just get a little bit more like dynamism in my image, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Bit more dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so it's something that I really like to kind of do quite often when I'm working like that. Just gives it, like, rounds it off, gives it that volume, and lets us kind of work with something really interesting. How are we going on time?
Got about 10 minutes, a little bit over 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Let's get the rest of the team in here and get, I'm going to hide this. I'm going to get some sense of like the rest of these shapes that are going to happen. That's going to be important as well. So let's grab a blue, light blue, and get these kind of like Christmas, like wind vents things coming in from how he's like grabbing everything into his mouth. Yep, there we go.
Nice.
It's just going to give it again that like nice Kirby vibe that we're after.
Yeah. That's cool. And a reminder as well, if you've got any questions or comments or anything like that, 10 minutes to go. Now is the time.
Yeah. All right, that's looking pretty good. Again, obviously not finished. We can probably also go into some of these highlights and my background elements here and change them from like a black to something else. So I'm going to lock the transparency on this pixel, on this layer here.
Right.
And how I do that is this little checkerboard up here, or press the // key on the keyboard, and that brings up this kind of lock.
Oh, / locks the layer. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I didn't know
so
that.
what that allows me to do, like the clouds, for instance, I want to get like a bit of a darker tone, but I can actually fill these without having to like redraw them. I can just go over that kind of layer there.
Yeah.
And so that when they are colored in with my kind of cloud fill color, they're going to feel a little bit more painterly. They're going to be not black, basically, is what I'm after. Because I want that to be reserved for Kirby and his little mate. And so those colors are going to work a little bit more painterly, a little bit more kind of cartoony in that sense.
Right, yeah.
And so it's just a darker version of the fill that I'm doing. And it just means that they're in the background and they're not like the main attraction.
Yeah. So having the outline will kind of might take away a little bit from the eye. Like you want it to be focused on the...
Exactly. And like usually I like the kind of the graphic value of like what an anime or a manga does with the black outlines. It makes it a little bit more graphic. But in these cases, I think it's fitting to have it be a little bit more kind of like painterly, less graphic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would spend a bunch more hours working on this at this stage. But let's get one of the important things in here, and that's this type. Right?
Yeah.
So
Xmas Ultra.
Xmas Attack Ultra. We could as well do like a nerdy version of this and go like, all right, let's get some like a Japanese version of this and see kind of how we go with that. And so we've got like Star, Kirby, right? And it's like whatever we can put underneath that. That's going to give it a little bit more like nerdy legitimacy, if you will. And then we can start adding in like, whatever, like Christmas adventure. I've got a very, very big brush here going.
Are you just writing random symbols, or do you actually know what you're doing here?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Missed one. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So we've got this. I'm going to stick with the English version for now. But I probably, if it was me for my brief, I would do an English and a Japanese version.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah. So with this now, what we've kind of got is some kind of swirly type. And a lot of kind of different effects that we can start to bring in here and like different placements. So I'm going to start with the word Kirby, and I'm going to make them all on kind of different layers. Ideally, what I should probably be doing here is working in Illustrator, because now I'm doing graphics.
Right. Yeah.
But let's stay in Photoshop and let's kind of work to something a little bit more clean. So now I want that brush to be like it would if it was an actual mouse brush. So I'm going to go back into Shape Dynamics and I'm going to change the control of the size and I'll just turn it off. And now I'm going to get that perfect round, everything the same size.
Yeah, a bit more like a font in this case. You want it, the thickness would be the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's going to allow me to kind of work a little bit more kind of clearly.
Nice.
All right. And then I'm going to turn that back on because I want to get a little bit more. I might put an effect on this, right? So let's give it a stroke.
Speaking of effects, there's this question from Bruce. Thanks for the questions today, Bruce, and yesterday. Would you use some field blur according to the things in the background and foreground? Yeah, would you ever like add a blur or something?
Oh, you could do.
Yeah.
You could do. And depending on the kind of style that I'm going for, I might do that. Just give it a bit of like a what's it called? Like field blur, depth of field, to kind of work something a little bit more interesting in there. But in this case, because it's cartoony and graphic, it doesn't really need it.
Right.
But other times, it can give it a real sense of like what's in front, what's behind.
Yeah.
But again, like I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the best thing for this here.
Yep. But it's definitely something you could do.
Absolutely, yeah. I would definitely kind of consider doing something like that for sure. So let's change the color of this now. We've got a stroke on it. We're working pretty good. Let's make this a nice kind of blue. And then we'll give the stroke a different color. So maybe we'll go with like a yellowy kind of vibe. Or maybe a lighter blue. I don't know. Again, these are all things that we can change later on. And I need to get a star going in here because the Kirby logo has that little kind of star in the loop of the B.
That's where Illustrator will come in super handy.
Yeah, 100%.
Make me a star. With some round corners.
So again, I'm working really fast here, like without too much care, but it's pretty good for what I need to do. Next up is this down here, so let's get that, and that can be That can be red with a little bit more kind of like dark red to it. So get a little bit of that kind of Christmas vibe.
Do you always do your S's like up like that?
Yeah,
So I always do mine
I have
down.
a hard time doing this. I always run out of space at the bottom.
Yeah.
Whereas I find that the other way tends to work out better.
I might need to copy that because I think I do the same thing.
It's not necessarily the best way to do it.
Hey,
but
whatever works.
It works, yeah, it works for me. And then let's get some like purple in here. And in fact, let's think about how that could be.
Change on the fly.
Bang.
Nice.
And then we want some, we want that orange in there as well.
Just a few minutes to go, maybe 2 minutes. One more question. Do the companies consider the color of their branding against the artwork?
If a company is telling you that you need to use their artwork, their colors,
Yeah.
that's what
That's
you got to
it,
do, 100%. So yeah, but there will also be like, it might not be necessarily like we want you to use the colors that we say you need to use, but like the theme of the brief kind of imposes it by default.
Yeah.
And so you're not working to brand colors, but you're still working to some colors because that's just what the company has asked you to do in the brief.
Yeah.
And so that's what you kind of need to do with that.
Yeah.
So now we're getting a little bit of kind of like icicles coming on for this.
Getting cold.
Getting cold. We could also scatter some snowflakes around this maybe.
We'll have to
Get
leave
that
it at
kind
the
of
snowflakes, I think.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that we have enough time to say our thank yous and goodbyes and things like that.
Yeah. So we didn't, obviously we're never going to complete this in an hour. Like trying to complete something like this, even with a bit of a head start in an hour, is just not realistic.
Yeah.
But I think we covered like most of what we needed to get through.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And trying to get this idea of like all the different tools that we used, all the different tips and tricks, and all the kind of the variations of like how the art works or not.
Yeah, that was awesome. And all from a random brief yesterday.
Very random.
Yeah, pretty random.
It's evolved a little bit. Yeah.
But I love that. Like, I love that it's evolved and changed over time. I mean, you're drawing a Santa, just kind of looked a little bit like Kirby, and then here we are doing, and then you can see where the brief has gone, right?
Yeah.
And then now, if this was, on that theme of filling out a portfolio, if this was something you wanted to do, you could refine it, and then you could put it into packaging. As you were saying before, you could have a Japanese version, English version.
Yeah.
Like, you could have it in situ on shelves. Like, there's so much you could do. You could do, now we're doing the in-game like artwork for it as well.
Totally.
You can expand, all that sort of stuff, and then suddenly you could really grow a brief. You could
Yeah.
do billboard advertising for it.
And now you got a project, right?
Now you got a project instead
Yeah.
of just a bit of artwork, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. Merry Christmas if you celebrate, all that sort of thing. We'll be back. We might have a stream next week. If not, we'll be back in the new year. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, everyone in chat hanging around. If you're watching the replay, thank you for checking it out. Jeremy, where can people find you?
So I exist at jeremylord.com.
Yep.
This is my website. So you can hit me up there. You can see a lot of my work. I am also JeremyLord_ on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is on my website, or it should be. But yeah, those are the two main things. And I've got a YouTube as well, which needs a bit of kind of TLC next year. But yeah.
Yeah, wait for the January drops on all of the socials. Thank you, everybody, and we'll catch you next time on Adobe Live.
Thank you.
See you later.